it comes to effect. 14 is a big adjustment for Saturn. Then at 21, then at 30, 29, 30, Saturn return. If you haven't found out what you're going to do by 30, if you haven't left home by 30, when will you? But you start your social, cultural world. You have usually by 30, you have your kids locked in, you have your work planned out, you see what you have to do to take care of this for the next 30 years, or 15 anyways. Then you hit 45, which is middle-aged adolescence or puberty, last chance, and you're reassessing things. Then you hit 60, 58, 60, when Saturn comes back, second Saturn return. Depending on how well you've lived, how healthy you are, how responsible you've been, then you can plan whether you have a spiritual life or not. You can plan the next 30 years, or you just start dying. So you start to see these normal cycles of what we've done with our life, what I'm doing with it, what's been done to me, what couldn't I do, and what responsibilities have I, what have I accomplished, what have I achieved. That's Saturn. So there's a certain normal factor with all of these factors coming together. That's the basic factor of life. And these factors have been in the understanding of life for thousands of years. As long as there's been astrology, people have been understanding some of these things and working with it. When you take the outer planets you can't see, the relatively newly discovered planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they represent unseen forces, unseen functions. So Uranus is a planet of excitement. It's shock and excitement. It disrupts things. It disrupts the structure of Saturn. It can do it really devastatingly or really positively. If you're prepared, the excitement can work well. If you're not, it can be devastating. But it creates the letdowns and the breaks and the shocks into one life. 21 is the first square. 42 is the next. 63 is the next. And 84. You have times where your whole process of life is changing, is altering from what you planned. If you get to 84, you're starting your second childhood, second way around. We'll get into these things more, but they move slower. They go. Neptune, it's 125 years. 165. Yeah, 165. So just let me get it here. Sorry. I'll be sending you this. 165, yeah. Okay. So Neptune's the planet of visions and beliefs and dreams, and your hopes and dreams, and also your guilts and sorrows and your expectations and your letdowns. This is Venus anticipating, expecting more. So it's the planet of romance and adventure. Everybody needs to have dreams, but sure, they can cause a lot of trouble in life. But nobody lives a whole cycle of Neptune. You can live a little more than half a cycle, but you won't ever experience the whole cycle. If you live to 84, you live one cycle of Uranus, you'll be part of a cycle of Neptune. And with Pluto, it's 250 years. It's a planet of confrontation and reality checks and truth and power struggles. At most, you get half a cycle. Like it's 225 years, 250, 49 years, 240, 250, 248 actually, but in that range. So 124, we're not even going to get half a Pluto cycle in our lifetime. We're going to experience lifetime. So they're not holistic. They're a little more extreme in one way or another. And these outer planets represent things that challenge the structures, challenge your discipline, and can disrupt all the personal things in one's life. So we're going to be looking through these one at a time, but there's so much to understand. So first we have to look at, when you want to understand any one planet, you have to start at birth and watch the squares, the oppositions, the squares, the conjunctions. You have to watch the phases and the cycles, and you have to watch them through the whole life. You have to see what happened up till now, and then by seeing what happened up till now and seeing the turning points, the big key points in that cycle, you can begin to anticipate what might be coming on the next. You begin to develop your approach towards it, and you begin to create a time perspective in your life around that planet. You begin to tune into its function in time. So each planet, just as the moon's going around the chart in the first month of your life, and it has this relationship to self, the 6 months, the 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, back to 28 days, you have that cycle. That's one cycle. There's so much to learn just from that cycle, but at the same time as that cycle is going on, there's 9 other cycles going on, or 8 other cycles going on. There's a cycle of the moon going around to Mercury, how the moon's affecting Mercury, how the cycle to Venus, there's a cycle to Sun, a cycle to Mars, a cycle to Jupiter, to Saturn, to Uranus, to Neptune, Pluto. There's all these other cycles going on at the same time within that primary cycle. At any time, there's all these textures. But if you look at it all, it's just too much to assimilate. You have to see the structure of the first site of the planet to itself first to get a sense of it. So we're going to be doing this, and like some of the planets, so each planet has a relationship to itself, and then it has a relationship to each of the other planets, and then it has a relationship to each of the angles in your chart. Wow, there's lots of cycles, and each one's unique and needs to be understood. What happened the last time, how it's relating to this time, how it's important to get a sense of this, to have a texture of working with that planet. Okay, so we're going to be doing this. We've got to navigate through this and getting the natal chart, knowing the signs, the categories, the houses or categories, the aspects, and learning to interpret the natal chart. That's a boat to travel across the ocean of seeming relevance. When you first start astrology, everything seems so huge. How can you ever understand it all? And that's the boat that lets you interpret a chart so you have something to navigate with. The transits really you're starting to be able to guide what's going on around you. It's a whole nother texture to it. But it only works as well as you can see how they're affecting the natal character, the person that you are. Because the same aspect can happen, a difficult aspect to your Mars or to one of your planets can happen in two different charts, and they're two very different things because of the different nature of each person and what's the priorities or how the psyche is built up in each person. It's quite phenomenal. There's so much going on. It's a question of like listening to a band, you have to sift through. Like if we're listening to a symphony and there's 30 violins over there, and one of them's out of tune, we're not going to hear that one that's out of tune. No one's going to hear it. The only person who's going to know is the conductor. He'll be able to hear and know exactly who's doing it wrong because he's cultivated his ability to hear all these different layers. We're doing that. It's like learning music. We're listening and tuning into these energies and tuning into we're learning the rhythms, we're learning the melodies, we're learning the harmonics, we're seeing between the factors in the chart, the relationships, and what proportion they expect, which one is how much attention each planet needs or deserves. But basically, when any planet's been inhibited or misused or abused, it's going to come out as other behavior. It's going to affect everything else. Just like if you're trying to go to a symphony and one of your friends went to the hockey game first and came in drunk and he's loud and rowdy, you're not going to want to go to a symphony with him. If you do, it's not going to be played. Like there's all kinds. The whole texture of life, it's filled with many different stories, and this is we got to navigate through what are the mainstreams going on. The mainstream first is each planet to itself, going around the chart, and that's a standard that works for everyone. What did you do at these times? How did your Mars unfold? How did your Jupiter cycle unfold? What happened here? What happened there? You can put the story of a person's life together for each person and start seeing the uniqueness of each person's life against the background of each planet to itself. Then we're going to have to work with each planet to the Mercury, each planet cycle to the Venus, each planet to the Sun, to the Mars, to the Jupiter. We're going to have to watch it affecting each planet. Now, okay. There's another thing that happens here. Each planet has a different speed. Well, I went through the order of the fastest to the slowest. The moon takes a month. Pluto takes 250 years. They're different phenomena. And when we're watching planets move around, well, we stopped the chart to do the natal chart. We stopped time to look at the natal chart. Here's the planets. And then we read into the planets and the signs affecting the planets affecting the house. So we see the aspects, but we allow for 7 to 10 degrees orbs of allowance. It's more or less in that phase with this phase of the aspect. So we're looking at vast, wider orbs because we're seeing how they're affecting a person across a whole lifetime. That's there. When we're coming to transits, we're not looking at a whole lifetime. We're looking at same aspects, same planets, same signs, same houses, same aspects. but we're watching them for a shorter period of time, for a couple of months or a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of years. Whenever we narrow down the orb, we cut down the orb of what we measure for aspects. And I cut down the orb. Some people, it's arbitrary. A lot of different astrologers use different sizes. I use 1 degree orbs. So anything within 1 degree of making an exact aspect, it's going to be noticeable. You can talk about it. That's the crisis time. That's the time that person is dealing with it. And when you can communicate, you can walk in and work with it. So I guess we have to think about crises times. Okay. When there's exact aspects, when there's transiting aspects, they precipitate crises. They force pressures. They really tend to create change. The change is good, but the energy is not easy. So you go with the change or you don't. You win or you lose. You get stronger, you get weaker. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And to a certain degree, you have to survive or you don't. Each planet comes out and tests us. It brings these crises times, these aspects. And when it's within a degree of orb of an aspect, that's when it's in its critical state. Something's happening then. So that's the fact. We narrow down the orbs to get these critical times. Then, then there's so many aspects. Really, there's 360 different degrees of aspects. We simplify them to say there's the major aspect, 1/2, 1/4, 1/3, 1/6 of a cycle. But and we give wide orbs in that. But really, even that, there's too many to watch. The main things to watch are the trines, the sextiles, the smooth aspects. They're there, but they're not going to be noticed against the stream of everything going on with so many people. You're going to notice the stressful things. If there's 100 people in a restaurant, in a clothing store, and one person starts screaming, everybody's going to leave their customer and solve the problem of that one person screaming. That's stress. You hit your hammer with the nail, you hit your thumbnail with a hammer, and you're no longer worried about your headache. It's something else that demands your attention. A crisis has come up. So many different types of crises, challenges, opportunities for growth, opportunities to deal with the challenge and come through it, or to fold. And we accumulate so many crises, so many successes, so many victories. So these tension points are the crises points, but we're going to narrow down to look at conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, the main stressful factors. In a whole cycle, we're looking at 4 main points in a cycle, the 4 extreme points to see what happens. And we're going to almost ignore the rest of the things. There's extra issues, there extra culling comes in, but until you see the backbone and the main structure of the sequence across a lifetime, you're going to get diversified too much. You're not going to be able to hold it together. So it's important. So we're going to be cutting back down to conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, watching those within 1 degree orb. So when a planet's moving, when it gets close, it's like there is a certain orb of influence. By the time if you come home and you see your husband and he's coming, or your wife, and they're coming out of the bed, it's one thing if you walk home and you find him in bed with somebody, this is a big blow up. That's an exact conjunction. But if you walk home and you come home and the wife's coming out of the bedroom doing up her shirt, and then the guy walks out afterwards, you may not have caught him in the act, but they're within an orb of influence. There's already a critical thing going on here. By the time you get over the guy's going out the door, you're not going to know. So there's different degrees of intensity, and they come down to these 1 degree point aspects. So we're going to be looking at 1 degree orbs of aspects, conjunctions, squares, and oppositions. And those are the crisis times, the challenges for growth, the opportunities for growth, the crisis times in life. We're going to be watching for these crisis times. Now, when you're working with a chart, so maybe it's a bit advanced, but there's 2 ways you can work with a person's chart. But right now, we're just getting the information. This is more next level. But